Hello and welcome to Football League World TV. We've got a special show for you this morning, a breaking news show. We've had some big news emerge from Sky Bet League One this morning. The news that Nigel Adkins has been sacked as manager of Charlton Athletic. It's been a pretty dreadful season so far for the South London side this season. They currently reside in 22nd position, 4 points adrift from safety. Tipped by many, including us at Football League World, to be well amongst the promotion mix. It simply hasn't gone that way, and Adkins has been relieved of his duties. My name is Sam Rourke, the Chief Editor of Football League World. I'm delighted to be joined by Marcus Ally this morning, journalist here at Football League World, and also a big Charlton Athletic fan. So the perfect man to get the reaction this morning. If you're watching, Charlton fans, on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, we want to hear from you. Please send in your comments, your opinions on the news this morning that Adkins has been relieved of his duties. Who do you want to replace Nigel Adkins at the Valley? We want to hear from you. Right, let's start off with it then, Marcus. This news this morning, it felt inevitable, didn't it?
It did, yeah. The position was really untenable. I think 2 wins, 3 draws and 8 losses from your first 13 matches of the season, considering where Charlton want to be competing this season, is not good enough at all. To be honest, from my point of view, I probably would have been calling from his head if we were outside the top 10 at this point. So to be outside the top 21 positions in League One is very worrying. It did feel inevitable. Obviously, Thomas Sandgaard coming over for the Accrington match on Tuesday night. It was revealed yesterday that there was a long board meeting into the early hours of Wednesday morning where it seems like that was the conclusion that they came to. Yeah, sadly, there was no signs that it was really going to turn around for Nigel Adkins, and this was a decision that had to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do you think are the main reasons behind Nigel Adkins' downfall at Charlton Athletic? I mean, from the outside, it looked like never seemed to be a clear, consistent 11 in terms of his selections. Very much seemed to tweak it weekly, formation changes quite often as well. I mean, what do you put Adkins' downfall to?
There's a lot of factors. I think the summer transfer window really didn't help him. The club went into the season for the first 3-4 matches. I remember the first game of the season, he made 1 sub and it was in the 88th minute because it was so youthful, the bench. We only really had a strong first 11. Then another thing that kind of went against him was maybe in hindsight having such a good end to the transfer window, which just hiked the expectations of the fan base, feeling like a playoff push was really on, despite I think we were sort of one draw and 3 losses by the time we got towards the end of August. He just couldn't get his methods across, really. It's a big squad of players. There was a lack of identity. He just clearly couldn't get his ideas across. At the start of the season, Jayden Stockley was put in as captain, and Adkins was very frustrated that we were reverting to a long ball approach far too often. He ended up then dropping Stockley, going with Josh Davison. There was one point a few weeks ago where we made 23 changes to the starting 11 in 4 matches. It's very hard to build relationships with so many new players if you're going to be chopping and changing like that. That's almost like what you meant to do in pre-season, but we didn't have those players in pre-season to do that. So there were some things that worked against him, but the performance is so below par that, sadly, there was no other decision that could come here.
Yeah, Charlton fans, get your comments in. We want to hear from you. Why didn't it work for Nigel Adkins at Charlton Athletic? We want to hear from you. Let's just touch on that game on Tuesday night. Another disappointing result for the Addicts at the Valley. There's been a few of them this season, hasn't there? I think in particular that 4-0 defeat to Bolton Wanderers stands out for me, and a lot of fans expected him to go after that. Are you somewhat surprised that he's lasted so long, given the kind of poor form that you've been on?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been hard to judge where Thomas Sandgaard would be in terms of pulling the trigger. He's been extremely lenient, I think, to give Adkins this long. Maybe a little bit naive, you could argue as well, because leaving it this late, the chances are this could actually get a lot worse before it gets better. Charlton are at Sunderland on Saturday, very tough game for Johnny Jackson's first match in caretaker charge. If we lose that game and results go against us, we could be 7 points adrift in the relegation zone by Saturday evening. It's a hard position to be in, knowing that if you win a match, you're still in the relegation zone. There's going to need to be a real shift in mentality. Moving on towards, there's an international break coming up in November. The chances are that even if Charlton start well under Johnny Jackson, we'll still be in the relegation zone pushing the end of November. Now, that could be linked to Sandgaard giving Nigel Adkins too long. We'll have to wait and see. The players, I'm sure, will be relieved on the main part that this decision has come, because there's a lot of new signings that just haven't clicked into gear under Nigel Adkins. And even though Johnny Jackson's been there as assistant, he'll be hoping that he can increase the confidence to start with. But yeah, change the mentality would be the key point as well.
Yeah, obviously Johnny Jackson and Jason Yule in interim charge right now. The kind of noises coming out from the Valley suggest that they're going to get some time to kind of prove themselves. And kind of the general thing that I get from a lot of Charlton fans is that they're willing to give Johnny Jackson time. He's always been someone that's been admired by Charlton fans, obviously a legend of the club as well. Marcus, do you kind of echo them sentiments and feel he's deserving of some time in the hot seat at the Valley?
Yeah, there's definitely a big feeling in the fan base that obviously it's maybe more of a theory, but that you need to have some kind of Charlton connection to succeed at the club. Looking back through my lifetime, obviously starting with Alan Kirbishley, was a previous player at Charlton, then Chris Powell getting us back up from League One, a previous player, and obviously Lee Bowyer as well. The three main successes since the turn of the century have all had connections with the club. Obviously Nigel Adkins didn't. Johnny Jackson on the pitch has probably been one of, if not the main shining light since Charlton were relegated from the Premier League in 2007. Joined the club well over 10 years ago, I think it is now. Has bided his time as assistant manager, was a huge part in getting promoted from League One in 2019 as Lee Bowyer's assistant. He had a caretaker match in between, Bowyer leaving for Birmingham and Nigel Adkins being appointed in March, won that match 3-2. The feeling was more that Jackson was going to get an extended period as caretaker then, but Adkins came in. Obviously, we are where we are now. So it feels like Sandgaard is going to give him a lot longer on the second time round. There aren't too many standout names out there. I think that might pay into it as well. Obviously, Adkins had 3 League One promotions on his CV when he got the job in March. There aren't too many names out there that have records like that. So, yeah, Johnny Jackson has that Charlton connection. Has been a great leader on the pitch for the club, sort of just missing out on the Championship playoffs when he came in a couple of seasons afterwards. So he deserves it. He's definitely earned it. As I said, one of the shining lights in what has been a dark sort of 15 years since falling out of the Premier League. So if anyone's earned the right to have some trust in a spell in temporary charge of Charlton in the near future, it is Johnny Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly issues that need to be fixed at Charlton Athletic on the pitch. Whoever does come in to replace Nigel Adkins, Marcus, what kind of, what issues do they need to fix? Is there a particular kind of formula that needs to be placed? Is there an identity that needs to be kind of embedded into that Charlton team? And what kind of main issues do you feel need to be resolved for that next manager to be a success?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to be looking very short term. If Charlton are relegated to the 4th tier, that would be an absolute disaster. The first thing that any manager has to do is get us out of the relegation zone. It's an interesting way to sort of comprehend that, whether that puts more pressure on them or less pressure than them, because that's a great squad, in my opinion, to be competing for the top 6 in League One. Getting out of the relegation zone with that squad would be seen as a success. But obviously, the downside of that would be so severe. So it's going to be interesting. I think Charlton have conceded the second most goals in League One this season. Only Morecambe have conceded more. So that's an area of the pitch that clearly needs a lot of work. Craig McGillivray in between the sticks has actually been one of our best players this season. So that speaks that it's not just a problem keeping balls out of the net. There's been a lot of problems in midfield this season. That's where probably most of the chopping and changing has been. So I think from a defensive standpoint, that would probably be the first thing that Johnny Jackson in the interim will look to sort out. And of course, could be a key factor in the short term, trying to get us out of the relegation zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a comment come in on YouTube from George Harvey. It had to happen. Who would Marcus want in as the next manager? And Marcus, who do you want?
Well, I'm glad to hear that Johnny Jackson is going to get time. As I said, so much respect for how long he's been at the club, his service. He definitely deserves a short spell. In Charlton's next 7 league games, they've got the likes of Burton, Shrewsbury, Morecambe and Doncaster. Particularly the last 3 are huge relegation 6-pointers, I think you'd have to say. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on there. If he does succeed in the short term, I'd be happy to see him get a deal until the end of the season. I don't want a new manager bounce and then the board get too excited, slap a 2-3 year deal on his head. I think you end up in a sticky situation sometimes when the new manager bounce comes to an end, revert to the old form, and then you've just shown so much confidence in the manager that it becomes a little bit of a dilemma. So if Jackson succeeds, I'd like to see him given a contract until the end of the season. If not, I'm going to get absolute pelters for this, but I think Neil Harris would be a good appointment. I think with his record, you really can't argue with it. Got Millwall out of League One and then had them pushing for the playoffs in the Championship, took over Cardiff, had them in the playoffs. And that job has aged well, considering how poorly Cardiff are doing now since Neil Harris has left. Aside from Neil Harris, possibly my first choice just in front of him, should Johnny Jackson not succeed in the interim, would be Michael Flynn of Newport. Not a huge name, obviously coming from Newport County, quite a small club in comparison, but that doesn't matter at all for me. Did a great job for Newport to avoid relegation from League Two a few years ago. Maybe that could kind of transfer to the job he'd have to do immediately at Charlton, and really evolved the way that the Exiles played, particularly last season. He's a very progressive manager, in my opinion. Obviously left Newport with their best will resigning rather than being sacked this season. Was so close and very unlucky to getting them promoted to League One. I think he's definitely a manager on the up. And someone I'd be happy to welcome to the Valley. But if Johnny Jackson succeeds in a caretaker, I'll be happy to take him on a short-term permanent deal for now.
Yeah, just touching on Nigel Adkins then next. I mean, what do you see next for Nigel Adkins? Because he had a pretty positive spell at Hull City prior to joining Charlton Athletic. There was a lot of optimism when he arrived at the Valley as well. Very kind of positive character, isn't he? Very likeable character, very likeable guy, very friendly. Likes to, share messages to fans on social media, likes to create a connection. But, simply it has not worked for Adkins on the pitch at Charlton. What do you see next for Nigel Adkins, Marcus? Do you see him picking up another job in League One or maybe a lower end Championship side kind of taking a punt on him? What do you think is next for him?
It's a tricky one, really. I think 56 years old, he's not too old for a manager. And obviously his CV is going to command a lot of respect. He did well with Charlton at the back end of last season. 1 loss in 10 games, miss out on the playoffs on goal difference. So that showed in a smaller sample size that he's definitely still got the nous at League One level. Obviously, he lives further up north. Coming to London was one of his more southern jobs, obviously, since Southampton. Had been at Sheffield United and Hull. So I think it'd be a smaller club. I can't see him getting another Championship job soon. Had great success at Scunthorpe. I've been thinking this the last few weeks, getting them into the Championship. Over a decade now, I think. They're struggling. Neil Cox could be under pressure. I'm not sure if he'd be interested in that. I'd assume he'd be taking a huge pay cut compared to what he was on at Charlton. But yeah, the answer is I'm really not sure. I don't see any club in League One this season thinking we'll go and get Nigel Adkins if they choose to sack or their manager resigns, nor in the Championship. So maybe in the short term, Scunthorpe. If not, I think he'll take plenty of time out of the game and definitely wait for the right club. I don't see him as a manager that's itching to jump at the first opportunity.
As we wrap up this breaking news show on Football League One TV this morning, Marcus, just want to get a kind of summary from you on Nigel Adkins' time at Charlton. How would you sum up his time at Charlton in kind of in a few words?
Well, he's taken us to the lowest point in our lifetime, so definitely the most concerning. I've never had to contemplate, thankfully, relegation to the 4th tier before, so that, in terms of the downside, was very poor. He showed hope last season in League One. It was a tricky time with no fans in the ground. Sadly, it didn't work out. Definitely a very positive guy and a guy that could inspire the right group of players. It just clearly wasn't the right group of players, and the wrong club at the wrong time. But yeah, I wish him well.
There we go. There's the news this morning. Nigel Adkins sacked as Charlton Athletic manager. Johnny Jackson and Jason Yule in interim charge for the foreseeable future. Thanks, everyone, for watching this show. If you're watching this show on repeat on YouTube, send in your comments down below as to who you think should take the helm at the Valley moving forwards. But Marcus, thanks for joining me this morning, and we'll catch up soon.